Broken soil, beautiful blooms. The power of resilience after trauma. Had the privilege of interviewing Tramell McLaughlin Taylor recently, and I'm still processing the profound impact of our conversation. Trammell isn't just a survivor, he's a revolutionary force of nature who has transformed his deepest wounds into wisdom that's changing lives across communities. His journey from trauma to triumph isn't just inspiring, it's a masterclass in human resilience that left me fundamentally changed. Today, I want to share what I learned from our conversation because sometimes the most broken soil produces the most beautiful, unexpected blooms. Have you ever wondered why some people collapse under the weight of trauma while others somehow find a way to rise? I used to think resilience was something you were born with, like having blue eyes or being tall. Either you had it or you didn't. I was wrong. What I've learned from Tramell and others who've walked through fire is that resilience isn't inherited, it's chosen every single day. Think about that for a moment. Every morning, someone who's been deeply wounded makes a choice: collapse or continue. And that choice, it's not just personal, it's revolutionary. When Tramell shared his journey with me, he emphasized something profound. Resilience isn't the absence of pain, it is the presence of purpose despite it. That sentence stopped me in my tracks. How many of us have believed the myth that healing means no longer hurting? That strength means never breaking down? This reminds me of Tarana Burke, founder of the Me Too movement. Long before hashtags and headlines dominated our social media feeds, Burke was working in silence and often in obscurity. As a survivor herself, she was serving in under resourced communities where sexual violence was routinely met with dismissal, blame, or deafening silence. Imagine this scene. It's 2006, and Burke is sitting across from a young girl who's just disclosed her own sexual assault. The pain in this child's eyes is overwhelming. Burke later confessed she couldn't bear to say "me too" in that moment. The word stuck in her throat. But that interaction haunted her, eventually becoming the catalyst for a movement that would change how we understand and respond to sexual violence globally. The pain Burke experienced and witnessed could have consumed her. Instead, she chose to create safe space for survivors to share their stories. What began as a grassroots effort to support young women of color became a global rallying cry that shifted cultural narratives around survivorship and led to policy changes worldwide. Time magazine eventually named her among its silence breakers, but her work began long before the spotlight in those quiet moments when she chose purpose over pain. That's the first lesson Trammell wanted me to share with you today. Resilience is a choice, not just a circumstance. No matter what hardships you face, whether it's trauma in your youth, betrayal in relationships, or instability at home, choosing to keep going is an act of power and self love. But here's where it gets complicated and real. What happens when the people who hurt you are the same ones you're expected to help or forgive or love? This brings me to the second insight from my conversation with Tramell. Forgiveness can be liberating, but not in the way most people think. We've all heard that forgiveness is for you, not the other person. It sounds nice, doesn't it? Almost poetic. But when someone has violated your trust, your body, or your childhood, forgiveness feels less like poetry and more like an impossible mountain to climb. Viola Davis knows this mountain intimately. Growing up in poverty stricken Central Falls, Rhode Island, she faced hunger, racism, and relentless bullying. She survived childhood sexual abuse by family acquaintances. She lived in rat infested apartments and carried the weight of shame that comes not just from trauma, but from being told your trauma doesn't matter. How do you forgive that? For Davis, the journey wasn't linear. She found solace in acting, not as an escape, but as an emotional outlet where she could express the full range of human experience that poverty and trauma had tried to deny her. She pursued education relentlessly, despite obstacles that would have deterred most people. Later in life, she sought therapy for healing from past wounds, a radical act for a Black woman in an industry and society that often expects Black women to simply be strong and carry on. As her star rose professionally, she began sharing her story publicly, shattering stigma around mental health and survivorship, especially within Black communities where such conversations have historically been taboo. Today, she's the first Black actor to achieve the Triple Crown of acting, an Oscar, an Emmy, and a Tony. Her memoir, Finding Me, debuted as a New York Times bestseller. But her most powerful achievement might be her radical transparency about pain and possibility. During our interview, Tramell shared something that echoed Davis's journey. Forgiveness isn't saying what happened was okay. It's saying you refuse to let it consume your future. This isn't about toxic positivity or spiritual bypassing. It's about reclaiming your power from those who never deserved it in the first place. And sometimes that reclamation requires both faith and science. Dr. Thema Bryant understands this intersection better than most. As a licensed psychologist and ordained minister who survived childhood sexual assault within her extended family, she navigated the stigma surrounding both faith based communities' reluctance toward mental health care and cultural silence around abuse among Black families. Rather than choosing between spiritual wisdom and clinical psychology, she combined them, developing workshops, books, and podcasts that center holistic healing specifically tailored for Black women survivors. After years spent hiding her pain out of fear and shame instilled by church culture, just pray it away, Dr. Bryant embraced both science and spirituality. Today, she speaks globally on intersectional approaches toward recovery after deep wounding. Her work has helped thousands reclaim agency over their stories through faith informed therapeutic practices such as embodied prayer, dance, journaling, and self compassion exercises. When I shared Dr. Bryan's story with Tramell during our interview, he nodded knowingly. That's exactly it, he said. Healing isn't one dimensional because trauma isn't one dimensional. You need all the tools you can get. This brings me to the third and perhaps most powerful insight from our conversation. Your story has value and power. Sharing your truth, no matter how difficult, is not just about healing yourself, but also about inspiring others who may be walking a similar path. I want to be clear about something. There's a difference between sharing your story and being forced to perform your pain. No one is entitled to your trauma narrative. You get to decide when, how, and with whom you share, but there's something almost magical that happens when we find the courage to speak our truth. When Tarana Burke first said "Me Too" to a young survivor, she couldn't have known those two words would eventually create a global movement. When Viola Davis began speaking openly about her childhood, she couldn't have anticipated how many people would find courage in her vulnerability. When Dr. Thema Bryant combined faith and psychology in her healing approach, she couldn't have foreseen how many would follow her lead. And when Tramell McLaughlin Taylor shared his journey with me, he did so not knowing who might be listening, who might need exactly his words, his wisdom, his witness. That's the power of story. It travels beyond what we can see or know. It reaches into places we might never physically go. It touches lives we might never meet. During our interview, Tramell said something that stopped me in my tracks. Every time you share your story, you're throwing a lifeline to someone drowning in silence. Let that sink in for a moment. Your story could be someone's lifeline. But here's the challenge: how do we share authentically without re traumatizing ourselves? How do we speak truth to power without becoming defined by our wounds? The answer lies in understanding that your trauma is part of your story, but it isn't your entire story. You are also your resilience, your joy, your creativity, your compassion, your future. As Tramell put it, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become because of, and sometimes despite what happened to me. This perspective shift is everything. It moves us from victim to creator, from object to subject, from passive recipient to active participant in our own healing. So here's my challenge to you, and it's not a small one. Look at your wounds not as things that diminish you, but as portals through which your greatest gifts might emerge. Ask yourself, what has my pain taught me that I couldn't have learned any other way? What strength have I discovered that I didn't know I possessed? What compassion have I developed that makes me uniquely qualified to help others? Then find one person this week with whom you can share a piece of your story. Not the whole thing, just one piece. Let yourself be seen, not as a victim, but as a survivor with wisdom to offer. Because here's what I know after speaking with Tramell: your voice matters, your journey matters, your healing matters, not just for you, but for all of us. When one person breaks the silence around trauma, they create space for others to do the same. When one person chooses resilience over resignation, they demonstrate what's possible for others. When one person transforms their pain into purpose, they light a path that others might follow. As Tramell so eloquently put it, from broken soil, the most beautiful things can grow. And I believe that with every fiber of my being, because I've seen it in Tarana, in Viola, in Dr. Thema, in Tramell, and now perhaps in you. The world doesn't just need your resilience, it needs your revelation. It needs the wisdom only you can offer, born from the very experiences you might wish you'd never had. So stand tall in your truth, speak it with courage, share it with compassion, and watch as the seeds of your story bloom in places you never imagined possible. Thank you.